Oh boy. I'm not going to lie. This one really bothers me. And it's interesting because you're seeing all these different scandals coming out at the same time. It's wild. But here's the thing. You've probably heard of this pastor, Pastor Robert Morris. Here's the headline. Confesses to moral failure after woman claims he began, let's just say for the sake of YouTube, abusing her at age 12. Gosh. This really hits home for me because I really like Pastor Robert Morris. I'm going to read the article for you, but I'll tell you what, man. Like this guy, he's been a pastor for a long time. He had some bouts with immorality when he was younger in his ministerial career. He had to step down and then God restored him. And I was just so blessed to see God restore somebody who seemed to have like thrown their whole ministry in the ditch. Because we all need mercy, right? We all need grace. So I was very excited to hear that. And this guy has preached some of the most powerful sermons I've literally ever heard in my life. There's two in particular. One, he did a message about tithing that literally brought me to tears. And his delivery on the heart of God for giving and for generosity and worshiping with our finances wrecked me. One of the best I've ever heard. The second message that I heard from him that really blessed me was he did a teaching on the spirit of Jezebel, which is the best teaching on the spirit of Jezebel and how to combat the spirit of Jezebel in your church and your organization that I've ever heard. Hands down, one of the most important messages that I think pastors in general need to hear. So this man, he's not my pastor. I haven't consumed a ton of his content, but two of his messages are absolutely two of my favorite sermons of all time that I've ever heard. And then you find out something like this happens, and it's just wild because people who are stuck in sin can still operate in a giftedness and even an anointing, regardless of what they're currently in or what they're hiding, which is like, it's so wild. It just shows me that God is so relentlessly after reaching people that he'll even use a broken vessel to do it. But let's look at the story more closely. This is what it says here. Robert Morris, founding pastor of Gateway Church in South Lake, Texas, which attracts an estimated 100,000 worshipers weekly. Sheesh, man. Has confessed to inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady more than 35 years ago while he was a young pastor after a woman accused him of sexually abusing her over multiple years, beginning when she was 12. When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years, Morris said in a statement to the Christian Post after Gateway Church was asked about the allegations. So thankfully, Morris said something about it, but I don't know how this whole accusation came out. I don't know if this young lady took it to social media or whatever, but here we are. In March of 1987, the situation was brought to light and it was confessed and repented of. See, that was what I mentioned about he had the moral failure. He confessed it, repented, process of restoration. Then he went back into ministry. I submitted myself to the elders of Shady Grove Church and the young lady's father. They asked me to step out of ministry and receive counseling and freedom ministry, which I did. Since that time, I have walked in purity and accountability in this area, Morris added. He explained that he returned to ministry in March of 1989, 2 years after his abuse was exposed, with the blessing of the survivor's father and the elders of his church. He further noted that he and his wife met with the survivor and her family in October 1989. I asked for their forgiveness and they graciously forgave me, Morris said. Morris's accuser, Cindy Clemeshire, first told the Wartburg Watch. What is the Wartburg Watch? Let's look at this. The Wartburg Watch. I wonder, let's see, what is this about the basic? Let's see what this whole thing's about. So this blog was started by two Christian women after watching what happened when one of their church, a Reformed Baptist church, mishandled, in their opinion, a pedophile situation, which left over 13 young teen boys blanked and scarred. When they confronted, okay, so it's like a blog, I guess, to kind of expose churches that are walking in hypocrisy and not dealing with this stuff, which I think is important, frankly. So in this, Cindy Clemenshire first told the Wartburg Watch that he had been sexually abusing her on December 5th, Christmas Day, 1982, and continued with the abuse for 4.5 years after that. Yikes. When contacted by CP on Saturday, the 54-year-old grandmother confirmed the details in the report, but insisted she was no young lady when Morris began abusing her. I'm, of course, just appalled, Clemenshire told CP on Saturday about his description of her as a young lady. I was 12 years old. I was a little girl, a very innocent little girl. And he was brought into our home, he and his wife, Debbie, and their little boy, Josh, entrusted and preached at the church that my dad helped start. And they began grooming all of us to do this, which took me decades to wrap my brain around as an adult, she said. Oh, jeez. It's devastating. It went on for many years. He says there was no sexual intercourse, but he did touch every part of my body and inserted his fingers into me, which I understand now is considered a form of RAPE by instrumentation, which is true. I was an innocent 12-year-old little girl who knew nothing about sexual behavior. Clemenshire said in her report to the Wartburg Watch that she and her family first met Morris at a youth revival in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1981 when he was a 20-year-old traveling evangelist. At that time, he was married to his wife, Debbie, and they had their son, Josh. She said Morris began preaching at her church regularly on Sundays after he was invited to do a youth revival in her hometown of Hominy, Oklahoma. Her family and the Morrises quickly became friends. They were invited into their home and often went on trips together. On that fateful Christmas night in 1982, Clemenshire said the safety of the relationship with Morris and his family ended for her when they visited her home. The Morris family came to visit and spent some time there. Cindy sat in the back seat of the car with Robert. He asked her to visit him in his room that night. She shared a room with her sister. Cindy, an innocent 12-year-old girl, movingly described what she was wearing. She was wearing pink pajamas with bloomer pants. She wore underwear underneath. She had a snap-up robe on, the Wartburg Watch said. Oh, dude, this is really bad. And this obviously happened a long time ago, but clearly the details about what had happened didn't really get exposed, and I feel so bad for that girl. She thought nothing of visiting a family friend in their bedroom. He told her to lie down on her back and touched her stomach. He told her to close her eyes. Then he touched her breasts and felt under her panties. He warned her never tell anyone about this because it will ruin everything, the report noted. Golly. Clemenshire claims Morris repeatedly abused her in Texas and Oklahoma, and he often told his wife that he was merely counseling her during the abuse. When she turned 16, Clemenshire said Morris would take her out in his car and try to have intercourse with her. By this time, Morris was a pastor at Shady Grove Church, which eventually would become Gateway Church Grand Prairie campus, the report said. Clemenshire eventually confided that what was happening to her to a close friend who encouraged her to tell her family. When her father found out, he told the lead pastor at Shady Grove Church that if Morris didn't get out of ministry, he would get the police involved. That threat forced Morris to step away for 2 years. I don't know if that was the right call. I think you should have got the police involved regardless, frankly. But I mean, I don't know all the details. I don't know what was going through that dad's head, but sheesh, man. It's horrific. Morris would return to Hominy with his wife and televangelist James Robinson. They told Clemenshire's father that he wanted to return to ministry, and at that point, her father washed his hands of Morris and no longer interacted with him, the Wartburg Watch said. The survivor made it clear to CP that Morris did not get her father's blessing to return to ministry. My father never ever gave his blessing on Robert returning to ministry. My father told him he's lucky he didn't kill him. I am mortified that he is telling the world my dad gave his blessing. Of course, we forgive because we are called to biblically forgive those who sin against us, but that doesn't mean he is supposed to go on without repercussions, she said. Clemashire explained that she retained an attorney in 2005 to file a civil lawsuit, but Morris's attorney suggested she caused the abuse on herself because she was flirtatious. Oh my gosh, man. This is rough. She said she asked for $50,000 to cover the cost of her counseling stemming from the abuse. She said they offered her $25,000 if she signed a non-disclosure agreement, but she refused. For years, she explained to CP, she has been warning churches. She explained to CP. CP's Christian Post, by the way, I'm assuming. She has been warning churches and pastors who would listen to her story about Morris because she doesn't believe she's the only one who suffered his abuse. She also argued that he shouldn't be serving in ministry and should step down. I don't think he ever should have been allowed in the ministry. We would never allow someone to go to teach in a school, work in a daycare, or be a doctor if anybody has done these things. And I have a very difficult time believing I'm the only one, Clemashire said. Elders at Gateway told CP in a statement that Morris was transparent with them about his past, and they believe he has been biblically restored to ministry. Pastor Robert has been open and forthright about a moral failure which he had over 35 years ago when he was in his 20s and prior to him starting Gateway Church. He has shared publicly from the pulpit the proper biblical steps he took in his lengthy restoration process, they said. The 2-year restoration process was closely administered by the elders at Shady Grove Church and included him stepping out of the ministry during that period while receiving professional counseling and freedom ministry counseling, they said. Since the resolution of this 35-year-old matter, there have been no other moral failures. Pastor Robert has walked in purity, and he has placed accountability measures and people in his life. That the matter has been properly disclosed to church leadership. All right, guys. So clear. Okay, so now we got the full picture here, right? So this moral failure happened back in his 20s, and he had quote unquote confessed to it. And there was a restoration process put in place by the eldership board, which is great. But it seems like, according to this girl's testimony, that the way that he talked about what had happened wasn't actually what had happened. And there was still a lot of damage that had been done with the young lady. And so some people might be asking the question, okay, so let's assume that what the elders are saying is true. He hasn't had a moral failure since then. Should this be readdressed? Well, I think the problem is that you have a young lady who was the victim of this situation, which is 100% a crime when it occurred. And the truth really didn't come out according to her side of the story. And the conversation with the father didn't happen the way that apparently it was said that it happened. Who knows? Okay. Who knows? Obviously, here's the reality. Obviously, there is more that needs to be uncovered and dealt with this story, because I think the assessment that the way he described it being very different from what actually happened, if what he has said and what this lady says are both the true accounts of what they're both saying, those are very different. Those are very different stories that I think at the very least this young lady and Robert Morris's congregation needs to understand, because here it is. Now it's out in the open and it needs to be dealt with. And so we need to pray that the truth wins out, that restoration happens, that reconciliation happens. Does that mean that he should not continue in ministry anymore? I think at this point there's got to be they got to clear this up before they just move forward with business as usual. Because if that story is not dealt with in a way that honors the Lord, it's going to be really hard for people to receive anything, I would imagine, from the ministry, which is tragic because, like I said, the guy is a brilliant Bible teacher, but there's an order to this stuff. This is the scripture that came to my mind as I was considering this story. Luke 12:2-3 says, "For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light, and what you have spoken in the ear in the inner rooms will be proclaimed on the housetops." That should put a fear of the Lord in all of us. I know it puts a fear in the Lord in me because I try to walk in integrity. I seek the Lord and look for his filling every single day. Praise God, I have an amazing relationship with my wife and my kids, but I'm human, man. And I know that I'm not immune. I'm not immune from the devil's tactics. Thankfully, the Bible says that if we draw near to God, God will draw near to us. And if we resist the devil, he will flee from us. No temptation has overtaken man as such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will deliver you from temptation and make a way out, always, okay? So that's 1 Corinthians 10:13. The bottom line is this. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. For a Christian, there's no excuse for sin. That's why the whole thing about us as Christians just like over-identifying with our past nature as sinners, it drives me crazy because it says in Romans 6 that we should reckon ourselves dead to sin. If all we are is a sinner that was saved by grace, but there's no real transformation that happens, like, yeah, we're going to keep on screwing up and sinning, then why would we be upset about a story like this? He's sinning. So what? That's what a sinner does. The problem is that he is a saint. All of God's people, anyone that's given their life to Jesus, has been crucified with Christ. They've been resurrected with Jesus. They are a saint, and they need to put to death the works of sin, the works of lawlessness, especially those in leadership. The Bible says, "Let not many of you become teachers, for you shall receive a stricter judgment." So this is a severe thing. But my prayer for all of us is that we would all take inventory and say, God, let us all be people that are above reproach in these days, so that we can represent you appropriately and so that we never need to be ashamed as we preach the word of truth. So, Father, I just ask right now, I want you to agree with me in prayer right now. Father, I pray right now for, first of all, the young lady now. She's a young lady. I pray, God, for an ability to just heal in Jesus' name, that there'd be a healing at every level of her being, spirit, soul, and body. There'd be healing in her family, that they would continue to walk in forgiveness for their sake. And I also pray for Pastor Robert Morris and his ministry, that they would, that the truth would win out in this situation, that this would, if deeper repentance must happen, that it would happen. And they would set an example for the body of Christ of what it looks like to really be clean before the Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen. What do you guys think in the comments? Let me know what you guys think below. And subscribe for more. I'm on a mission here to take back media from the devil and reveal the glory of God in every glowing screen, to teach the word of God and expose the works of wickedness that the devil is doing. I'm not saying Pastor Robert Morris is a devil at all. He's a man of God who has fallen, and I'm cheering for his restoration, for his sake, his family's sake, and his ministry's sake. But I also pray for the truth to come out and for healing and justice to be served. So, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe for more, please. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.